What if I told you your lottery win isn't in the future? It's already happened, and you're just remembering it now. This isn't wishful thinking. This is the law of assumption in action. And today I'll show you exactly how to manifest a lottery win using a proven method that's helped thousands align their consciousness with wealth effortlessly. This isn't magic. It's creation from within. It always begins with a question that haunts the edges of the imagination. Can I really manifest a lottery win? Can I change my reality by assuming the end? I remember a time when a friend of mine, a man of modest means and simple desires, came to me with this very question. He wasn't driven by greed, but by a desire to be free, to live without fear, to provide without struggle. He said to me, I don't want to chase money anymore. I want to know if this power within can truly draw the lottery to me. I asked him nothing of probabilities, odds, or statistics. Instead, I asked him, what would you do tonight if the winning ticket were already in your hand? He smiled. I told him, then do that. Assume the feeling, dwell in the end. You went home that night and slept not as a man who wished to win, but as a man who had already won. He imagined the texture of the ticket, the celebration, the phone calls from relatives, even the calm that came over him as he deposited the check. Not once, not twice, but every night for weeks. 3 months later, he called me, breathless, trembling, not from disbelief, but from reverence. He had won, not a mere scratch card, but a six-figure sum. And in that moment, he did not thank luck. He thanked the Lord. Now I will tell you exactly how this works, not in theory, but in principle, not through chance, but through inner certainty. It always begins with a question that appears to linger at the outer rim of belief. Can I really manifest a lottery win? Can imagination alone bring fortune into my hands without labor, without chance, without compromise? These are not the inquiries of the dreamer. They are the questions of the awakened. For only the awakened dare to wonder whether the visible world is but a shadow cast by the deeper invisible realm within. I was not born into wealth. I knew the taste of lack, the restraint of budgets, the ache of desire unmet, and yet within me stirred a strange knowing, a whisper that the world I saw was not fixed, that the structures of wealth and success were not sealed behind gates of effort, but were waiting behind the doors of assumption. The first time I heard the phrase, live from the end, it didn't land as philosophy. It arrived as a challenge. Could I really walk the earth in the state of having, while my senses screamed the opposite? The opportunity to test this came not in theory, but in life. A friend, humble in background, unacquainted with spiritual laws, but rich in sincerity, came to me with a trembling heart. He wanted to win the lottery, not for decadence, not for pride, but to liberate himself from the grind of survival, to care for his mother, to offer his children a life beyond struggle. He asked if it was possible. And I told him what had once been told to me, not as advice, but as commandment. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, live in the state of the end, see what only you can see, and persist. He went home that very evening, and he did not visualize numbers or chase winning combinations. Instead, he crafted a scene in imagination, a scene that would only be true if the wish were fulfilled. He saw himself clutching the ticket, not as a hope, but as a certainty. He felt the emotions rise in his chest, the weightlessness of financial freedom, the tears of quiet joy, the phone calls from friends amazed by his transformation. Every night he replayed the scene, not once, not twice, but again and again, until it became more real to him than the silence of the room in which he lay. You must understand that the world does not respond to what we want. It does not bend to longing. It bends to conviction. When he walked through the marketplace, he did not walk as a man in need. He walked as one who had already received. When he spoke with friends, he concealed nothing, but in his own inner silence, He communed with the reality that was now his. This is not delusion. This is discipline. This is the art of aligning inner consciousness with the outer echo. There is no difference between $1 and $1 million to the infinite. The difficulty is not in the amount, but in the acceptance. We do not receive according to what is fair or logical. We receive according to what we have accepted as true in consciousness. If you believe a lottery win is beyond you, that it is reserved for others, then so it shall remain. Not because the universe denies you, but because your assumptions do. Creation is finished. Every possibility exists now. The lottery win is not in the future. It is in a dimension of being that must be occupied now. And how do we occupy it? Not through effort, but through assumption. Assume it, feel it, rest in it. Imagination is not idle. It is the creative force behind all experience. When properly employed, it is the master key to unlock the vault of any destiny. The man I spoke of earlier did not simply imagine one night and forget the next. He persisted for days, for weeks. He did not check his bank account for proof. He did not speak of how long it might take. He assumed the role. He stepped into the version of himself who had already won. And then, seemingly by chance, the external played its part. He bought a ticket as usual, not with desperation, but as ceremony. The numbers came, the win came. But long before it came in hand, it had arrived in consciousness. The world calls it coincidence. I call it obedience. The outer obeys the inner, always. So the question is not whether you can win the lottery. The question is, are you willing to assume you already have? Can you walk, breathe, and sleep in the identity of a person who holds wealth, who laughs without fear of bills, who gives generously, who is free? Most fail not because the method is weak, but because the inner discipline is abandoned. They stop too soon. They listen to the senses. They say it's not working. But the law responds not to time, but to intensity. If the assumption is pure, sustained, and felt, it must express itself in the world of fact. Let others count the odds. You count your conviction. Let them say it's 1 in a million. You say it is done. Do not wish, do not wait, do not beg. Enter the state and remain. That is how you win the lottery, not by chasing, but by assuming. It is not the outer act that changes reality. It is the inner knowing from which all acts spring. When one attempts to win the lottery through rituals, chants, or repeated purchase of tickets without inner transformation, the result is governed by the law of repetition, not the law of assumption. The one who wins deliberately is the one who has first won in consciousness, for all things begin and end in imagination. To visualize a winning lottery ticket is not simply to see numbers on paper. It is to experience what only the winner can experience. It is to enter the dimension of fulfillment and dwell there until the senses yield. I have often said, and I say again, the difference between failure and manifestation is the absence or presence of inner identification. If you visualize yourself as the one who wins, and that visualization is infused with feeling, not just any feeling, but the feeling of finality, then your world must take shape accordingly. The outer world is plastic to your inner touch. It has no life of its own. It simply reconfigures itself to mirror your assumption. You are not a beggar hoping the odds favor you. You are the operant power, selecting your state and living from it. This is the secret behind the practice known as feeling it real. You do not merely see the event, you embody it. You do not merely speak the words, you hear them spoken back to you in the theater of the mind. You do not simply imagine a check, you feel the crispness of the paper, the ink pressed against your fingertips, the subtle surge in your chest as you realize the numbers match. That is how reality is born. It is not born of effort, but of embodiment. Many speak of the law of attraction, and they believe that by desiring a thing, they will draw it to them. But there is a subtle flaw in that understanding. The law of attraction acknowledges the distance between you and your desire. It begins with lack. It says, I want this, and therefore it confirms the absence. But assumption erases that gap. Assumption begins with identity. It says, I am the one who already has this. There is no separation. There is no waiting. There is only being. When you want to manifest a big win, you do not stand outside the door of fortune and knock. You walk through as if the door had never been closed. You do not visualize your future. You revise your present. You speak from the state, not toward it. This is the difference between hoping and knowing, between delay and demonstration. If you imagine that the lottery is something to be attracted, you will forever be chasing a reflection. But if you understand that the lottery is simply one of the infinite expressions that match the inner state of abundance, then you will cease to pursue and begin to receive. You will realize that wealth is not a number, it is a vibration, a frequency. And that frequency is reached not by calculation, but by consciousness. You must create your world deliberately. You must do it with precision. You must wake in the morning and not ask what will happen today, but declare today is the day the evidence of my assumption becomes visible. When doubt arises, as it often will, do not resist it. Replace it. Go back into the scene. Sit once more in the chair of the winner. Hear the voice that congratulates you. Smell the champagne that toasts your success. This is not fantasy. This is the reality from which the shadow of the world takes form. Your subconscious mind does not argue. It accepts what is impressed upon it. And what impresses it most powerfully is feeling. Not empty repetition, but the rich saturation of belief, sensation, emotion. Speak your affirmations if you must, but do so from the place of embodiment. Say, I have won. I am wealth itself. My numbers were called, and I received what was always mine. Say it until it feels true, and when it feels true, it is true. Understand this. The moment you feel it real, the moment you impress upon the subconscious the new state, a bridge of incidents is set in motion. You do not need to know how the win will occur. That is not your concern. The how is not your job. The how belongs to the unseen current of life, which rearranges people, circumstances, and time itself to make your assumption flesh. You may be led to buy a ticket you would not normally choose. You may be delayed by what seems an accident, only to arrive at the exact moment your manifestation awaits. Trust the law. Remain faithful to the unseen. You are never waiting for a miracle. You are simply aligning with it. It already exists. Creation is finished. The version of you that holds the winning ticket, that answers the door to opportunity, that sleeps in comfort and gives without hesitation. That version exists now. You reach it by assuming it is already so. The mind of man is a fertile field. Whatever is planted there with faith and repetition will grow. If you plant the seed of doubt, it will bear the fruit of delay. If you plant the seed of certainty, it will bloom into manifestation. So plant carefully. Cultivate with joy. Let each night be your workshop, each dream your blueprint. Assume it, feel it, live it, and the world will unfold the evidence in due season. The subconscious mind is not a passive observer of the outer world. It is the architect of all outcomes, the silent partner that accepts every impression given to it in faith and births it into form. When one desires to manifest a lottery win or any demonstration of great wealth, the question is never whether the event is possible. It is whether the state has been accepted and embodied below the level of the surface mind. You are not dealing with chance. You are dealing with law. And the law does not respond to begging or repetition. It responds to inner acceptance. If you say, I want to win the lottery, your subconscious hears only the vibration of wanting. If you say, I have already won, and you feel that statement with intensity, richness, and emotional certainty, then your subconscious takes it as truth. And once it accepts it as truth, it must externalize it. The lottery win is not a miracle in the traditional sense. It is an outpicturing of a deeper assumption. You manifest big money fast, not by trying to will it into being, but by assuming state of the one who already holds it. I once spoke to a woman who told me she had written affirmations for months, declaring wealth, abundance, and winning, but nothing in her life had changed. I asked her what she did each evening before falling asleep. She said she repeated her affirmations aloud. I asked her what she felt while repeating them. She admitted she felt foolish, that a part of her didn't believe the words. That is the error. Words without feeling are powerless. It is not the words that impress the subconscious, but the emotional conviction behind them. The woman was sowing seeds in barren soil because she never entered the state of belief. When she finally allowed herself to feel the thrill of having already received, everything changed. To assume and receive money, one must understand that the process is not sequential. It is not assume then receive. It is assume equals receive. The two are one. The outer evidence may arrive in a day or a month or a moment, but the reality was already born at the moment of assumption. All things in this world take time to grow, but the seed is planted in an instant. The mistake many make is digging up the seed with doubt, questioning whether it's working, wondering if they've done enough. You do not need to do more. You need only to remain faithful to the state assumed. I have witnessed countless manifestation stories where individuals came to this truth, not by chance, but through willingness to persist in the unseen. One man imagined himself walking into a bank, handing over a check, and watching the teller stamp the deposit with wide eyes. He repeated this simple scene every night, the same steps, the same breath, the same click of the pen. Weeks later, he received an inheritance he never expected. Another man saw himself standing at a podium, thanking others for a donation he had yet to receive. And soon, tens of thousands were given to him, unprompted, from a benefactor he hadn't heard from in years. These are not fantasies, these are demonstrations. They are not exceptions to the law, they are examples of the law rightly applied. If you can feel it real, the world must follow. The subconscious does not debate, it does not filter, it does not weigh probability, it accepts and it builds. That is its function. You must stop thinking of money as distant, as hard, as conditional. Money, like anything else, is a state. It flows not to the one who needs it most, but to the one who assumes its presence. A man in poverty who imagines from wealth is wealthier in substance than a rich man who fears loss, because only the inner state creates continuity. The rest is appearance. There is no limit to what may be drawn into form when the subconscious mind is impressed with clarity to manifest a sudden fortune. To hold a ticket that matches numbers you never consciously chose is not difficult for the one who lives in the state of having. The difficulty lies only in overcoming the conditioned mind that insists on logic, that says, this is too good to be true, or this cannot happen to someone like me. Those thoughts are the weeds that must be uprooted. You change them not by resisting them, but by drowning them in assumption. Replace them. Crowd them out with scenes of the fulfilled desire. Fill your inner world so completely with the new state that the old one has no room to breathe. The only difference between the one who receives and the one who remains in lack is this. The receiver believed within first. And that belief was not shallow. It was not tentative. It was total. So total that the outer world had no choice but to conform. And conform it did. There is a version of you that already lives in abundance, a version that wakes without worry, that purchases without hesitation, that gives without calculation. That version is not far from you. It is you in another state of awareness. And that state is always one assumption away. When you seek to manifest big money fast, do not rush to act. Rush to assume. Let the action be born of the inner conviction. Let the ticket you buy be not a desperate hope, but a symbolic act of your internal reality. The outer is always an echo. If you do not like the echo, change the voice that spoke it. Your subconscious is listening, it is waiting, it is ready to produce whatever blueprint you impress upon it. Make that blueprint one of joy, of gratitude, of completion, and then simply allow the outer to catch up. To live from the end is to step into the only true power man possesses, the ability to choose his state of consciousness regardless of appearances. There is no greater technique, no deeper mystery than to imagine oneself already in possession of that which is longed for and to persist in that belief until the world mirrors it. It is not enough to merely think of the end. One must think from it. And that subtle distinction is the difference between delay and demonstration. When a man desires to win the lottery, he must ask not what numbers to play or what day to choose, but what would I be doing if it were already done? Would I walk differently? Would I answer my phone with a different tone? Would I speak with more certainty? Would my body carry itself with a new rhythm? These are not trivial questions. These are the very keys that unlock the state of the fulfilled desire. And once that state is entered and embodied, the outer world must obey. One cannot live in the present and attempt to create the future. That is to chase shadows. One must exit the present as defined by the senses and enter the state where the wish is already fulfilled. To imagine the end result is not merely to see oneself holding a check or hearing a number called. It is to feel the internal shift that such an event would cause. It is to know with unwavering conviction that life is no longer the same. It is not rehearsal, it is remembrance. To win, you must become the one who has already won. This is not delusion, this is alignment. The world is not fixed, it is fluid. It molds itself to reflect the being you occupy. If you wait for the world to change before you change your mind, you wait in vain. But if you dare to change your inner state while all the facts contradict it, then you will see how obedient the world really is. I once advised a man who wished to free himself from financial anxiety. He spoke not of greed, but of freedom, of peace. He longed to break free from the limitations that had governed his family for generations. I asked him what he would do the morning after receiving the news of a great win. He described it in detail. Coffee on the balcony, laughter without the weight of worry, a long drive to the ocean just to hear the wave. I told him, then do that. Not externally, but internally. Rehearse that scene in the silence of your mind until it becomes more real than your current surroundings. Do not merely observe it. Enter it. He followed the instruction without questioning. Each night he imagined the exact moment of checking the numbers, the gasp in his breath, the stunned silence, the tears that came unprovoked. He did not ask how. He simply remained in that state, gently, persistently. 1 month passed, then another. Then a check arrived, not from the lottery, but from a forgotten investment his late father had made, a sum that surpassed what he had hoped to win. He laughed and said, "It didn't come the way I thought, but it came because I believed." You see, the subconscious mind is not bound to the how. It is not limited to a method. It responds only to the assumption of the end. It selects from infinite possibilities that which most naturally fulfills your inner conviction. The lottery, then, is not a goal. It is a symbol of abundance, of ease, of surprise. And when that symbol is felt as natural, the channel through which it arrives will appear. To imagine the end result is to use the most sacred faculty given to man. Imagination is the womb of reality. What you create there must in time come forth. But the process requires faith, not in an external deity, but in your own capacity to assume and remain. The state must be occupied so completely that the senses, though they protest, are overruled by the inner knowing. The one who assumes must not look back. He must not check and recheck for signs. He must not say, "It is not here yet," for in doing so he returns to the state of not having. The assumption must be so vivid that no evidence to the contrary can shake it. That is what it means to live from the end. You do not wait for the world to convince you. You convince the world by refusing to be moved by it. The true assumption does not waver. It is not puffed up with excitement one day and abandoned in doubt the next. It is still. It is quiet. It is certain. It becomes part of your breath, your speech, your posture. It takes root. And from that root, the fruit must grow. I say again, the act of winning is not done in the moment of exchange. It is done in the secret chamber of the mind when you dare to call something yours before anyone else does. When you rise from your seat with the feeling of completion, not hope, not longing, but fulfillment, you have entered the state. And once entered, all things necessary for the expression of that state will come to pass. You must remember, the world is not separate from your assumption. It is your assumption made visible. When you accept this, you no longer plead with the world to change. You change the inner and allow the outer to mirror it. So imagine wisely, assume boldly, and persist quietly. That is how you live from the end. That is how you win. Manifestation is not governed by time, it is governed by assumption. When you hear stories of overnight lottery manifestation, understand that the term overnight is a reference not to the clock, but to consciousness. The manifestation appears to come in a moment, but the assumption that produced it may have been planted in silence days or weeks earlier. It is the nature of spiritual law to appear suddenly, but never by accident. There is always a pattern, a bridge of incidents that unfolds from the moment the inner reality is accepted as true. Many grow impatient. They say, I have imagined, I have assumed, but nothing has happened. They measure progress by the evidence of the senses, and in doing so, they deny the unseen work already in motion. The seed does not sprout at the moment you look. It sprouts when the conditions are fulfilled. And the greatest condition of all is unwavering assumption. When you accept the state of having already received, regardless of delay, regardless of doubt, you water the seed. You nurture it through faith. The bridge of incidence is the pathway by which your assumption expresses itself in the world of form, but it rarely appears as expected. A missed appointment, a wrong turn, a lost ticket, a sudden conversation. These are not interruptions. They are threads being woven into the tapestry of fulfillment. The mind that clings to logic will reject them, but the awakened soul recognizes their place. When the desire is accepted internally, the external must rearrange itself to support it. And that rearrangement often begins with disruption. There was a man who imagined winning a great sum. He felt it real. He slept in the feeling. But in the days that followed, he lost his job. His car broke down. He became discouraged. He thought, surely I am moving further from my goal. But what he could not see was that these events were clearing space, removing what no longer matched the frequency he had chosen. Within weeks, he was offered a position at a company that hosted a charity event where he met the organizer of a raffle, which led him to the exact sequence that fulfilled his original assumption. Had he judged by appearances, he would have turned back. But instead, he trusted the unseen. You do not need to understand the bridge. You need only to walk it. And the walking is not physical. It is mental. It is spiritual. Each moment you hold your inner conversation in alignment with your fulfilled desire, you step across that bridge. Each time you refuse to contradict your assumption, even when the facts scream otherwise, you cross over into your new reality. Inner conversation is the cornerstone of creation. What you whisper to yourself when no one is listening becomes the script of your life. If you speak of delay, struggle, and impossibility within, you need not be surprised when the world reflects the same. But if you choose to speak as the one who has already received, the world must bow to that decision. Say within yourself, I am the one who always wins. I am chosen. The numbers align for me. Wealth flows to me easily and without resistance. And say it not as a spell, but as a declaration of truth. You cannot fool the law. It reads vibration, not vocabulary. If your words are correct, but your feeling is weak, there is no power. But if your words and feelings are one, if they rise together as one song of certainty, then nothing can stop the result from manifesting. Speak from the end, walk from the end, sleep from the end. Let every inner act be a rehearsal of the desired outcome, and your world will conform. To trust the unseen is the highest act of spiritual maturity. It is to walk blindfolded through chaos and yet hold the vision of harmony. It is to be surrounded by contradiction and still speak as if the promise were fulfilled. The outer world is delayed in its response, not because the law is slow, but because the mind is inconsistent. Stabilize the mind in assumption, and the outer becomes fluid. Reality is a mirror. It does not lead, it follows. A woman once wrote of her success using this exact principle. She desired a sudden financial breakthrough. Each night, she imagined her sister calling her in shock, saying, "You won, I can't believe it, you actually won." She repeated this scene over and over, letting the voice of her sister ring in her ears until it became natural. One night, without planning it, her sister called, not to confirm a lottery win, but to share that she had anonymously received a gift of over $100,000, 0 cents, and was certain the sender was the woman herself. That same day, the woman received a check from a long-forgotten inheritance, a sum beyond what she imagined. She had not told anyone of her imagining, yet the echo returned. Do not judge the form. The law does not care whether it is a winning ticket or a legal settlement or a gift from a stranger. It only responds to the state you live from. Live from wealth, and wealth will find its own channel to reach you. The unseen is always moving. The question is not whether the law is working, it is whether you are remaining in the state long enough to allow the result to appear. So do not seek the fastest method. Seek the firmest assumption. Let the world be as it may. Let others doubt. Let facts waver. You have chosen the end, and the bridge will carry you there. There are those who believe wealth is written in bloodlines, in systems, in economic winds that blow only in one direction. But those who know the truth understand that wealth, like every other form, is shaped in consciousness. It has never been a matter of how much you earn or how often you work, but how persistently you imagine. The world mirrors the inner script, and that script is entirely your own. If you are dissatisfied with the lines you have been repeating, you must begin to rewrite them. This rewriting is not metaphorical, it is literal within the inner man. To script wealth is to replace the stories of limitation, lack, and unworthiness with stories of certainty, success, and surplus. The one who writes with faith does not argue with the past. He simply selects a new future and plants it like a seed. He does not fight with his current balance. He imagines a new one. He does not count his debts. He counts the moments. He rehearses abundance with feelings so full that the subconscious has no choice but to accept it. The mind is impressionable, and it repeats what it has most deeply accepted. If since childhood you have heard that money is hard to keep, hard to find, or only for the lucky, those phrases have not just lingered. They have embedded themselves into the soft clay of your subconscious. But just as a script can be rewritten, so too can belief be revised. You do not need to challenge the old belief directly. You only need to stop feeding it, starve it of attention, and it will dissolve. Begin instead to impress the mind with the feeling of already being wealthy. This is not deception, it is resurrection. You are calling to life a version of yourself that already exists in the infinite field of possibility. There was a woman who lived in a constant state of financial emergency. Each month she said the same words, "It's never enough." She did not realize those words were not commentary, they were commands. Her world echoed them faithfully. When she learned this principle, she decided to revise. She did not argue with what was, she simply imagined what would be. She wrote a new script. I always have more than enough. Money comes easily. I am supported, guided, and richly sustained. She did not just say these words. She wrote them with emotion, spoke them aloud, and most importantly, began to feel them as if they were already true. Each morning she read them before touching her phone. Each night she imagined herself handing money to a friend, smiling, relaxed, free. In time, the people around her changed, the opportunities shifted, and her income more than doubled, not through new skills, but through new states of consciousness. She had changed her script, and the world obeyed the new author. This is the art of revision. You do not need to be bound by what has been. A poor past is not a prophecy unless you allow it to repeat. Every assumption carries within it a consequence. And if you do not revise, you relive. But when you rewrite the memory, you rewrite the pattern. The subconscious does not know the difference between what is and what is imagined. It only knows what is deeply felt, and what is felt long enough becomes fact. To persist in the unseen is the greatest test of the creative soul. It is to hold fast to the inner world even as the outer shows no sign of change. Most people falter here. They begin with excitement and drift into doubt. They ask, when will it happen? Or why hasn't it worked yet? And in asking, they affirm that it has not happened. They fall out of the state. But the wise man does not ask. He declares. He does not wait for proof. He walks in fulfillment. He knows that time is only the servant of assumption. And assumption is the master of fate. The world around you may shout numbers and odds and logic. It may tell you what is probable, what is earned, what is fair, but you are not bound by its calculations. You are bound only by your own acceptance. When you persist in the unseen, when you keep rehearsing wealth in the silence of your own being, you draw to yourself the bridge that carries you into visible abundance. It may be the lottery. It may be an inheritance. It may be a door you never knew existed. But come it must, because law does not fail. Your imagination is the divine link between spirit and substance. Whatever you imagine with feeling long enough, deeply enough, and consistently enough must come into view. Imagination is not idle. It is not escape. It is creation in its purest, most faithful form. To imagine wealth when you feel broke, that is the highest act of faith. To imagine winning when the world calls you foolish, that is true boldness. And the world does not reward the careful. It rewards the faithful. So if you desire wealth, do not chase it. Assume it. Do not ask for it. Accept it. Do not seek proof of it. Produce it in your mind first, and the world will find a way to bring it into view. This is not theory. This is law. The one who dares to revise, to persist, and to dwell in the end will find that all things conspire in silence to bring the invisible into form. Everything in your world begins and ends with your state of consciousness. When you see someone experience repeated success or seemingly miraculous abundance, you are not witnessing luck or divine favoritism. You are witnessing the unfolding of a selected state. All states exist. Every possible outcome, every version of you who has ever won, ever lost, ever risen, or ever lacked already is. You do not create the state you selected, and once selected, it expresses itself according to its nature. If you desire to manifest a lottery win or any other form of sudden abundance, do not begin by seeking the numbers or the method. Begin by entering the state in which winning is natural. Ask yourself, what does it feel like to be the one who always wins? Not what would it look like, what would it feel like? That feeling is the doorway to the state. And when you enter the state, you do not merely visit, you remain. The outer world is nothing more than the delayed reflection of the inner world. What you feel now is what will take shape tomorrow. If you feel disappointed, hesitant, or uncertain, you will unknowingly create more events that echo those feelings. But if you saturate the mind with the tone of certainty, not noisy, desperate emotion, but quiet inner conviction, the world will follow. It has no choice. It is bound by the law. You are always selecting states, whether consciously or unconsciously. You select them with your attention, with your inner speech, with your repeated focus. A man who thinks of poverty all day is not being punished by life. He is being faithful to his inner world. The same law that brings wealth when you imagine wealth brings limitation when you imagine lack. The law is not personal. It reflects, and that reflection is shaped by the state you occupy and the emotions you reinforce. Do not confuse excitement with faith. Excitement may come and go, but the man who wins does not shout about his belief. He rests in it. He walks quietly, but with full assurance that what he has imagined has already been granted. His inner world is saturated with the reality of his desire. He no longer negotiates with doubt. He no longer seeks evidence. His being is anchored in the end. To saturate the mind is to fill it so completely with the scenes, sounds, and feelings of your desire fulfilled that nothing unlike it can take root. This requires more than once a day visualization. It requires awareness throughout the day. What are you thinking when you're waiting in line? What is your mental posture while driving, while lying in bed, while preparing food? Are you imagining outcomes you do not want? Or are you revisiting the reality that you have already selected? The one who masters manifestation is not the one who practices occasionally. It is the one who lives internally as though what they want is already theirs. Every idle thought becomes intentional. Every mental conversation becomes a rehearsal of the fulfilled desire. When this saturation becomes natural, manifestation becomes inevitable. You must feel the end so deeply that the need to force it fades. This is what is meant by letting go. Letting go is not abandoning the desire, it is abandoning the doubt. It is the quiet confidence that what you assumed has already taken root, and the world need only catch up. You no longer chase it, you no longer plead for it. You receive it now and trust that its visible appearance is only a matter of unfolding. One evening, a man who had long desired to win the lottery decided to stop imagining the event of winning and began imagining the life that came after the win. He felt himself in a new home with light streaming through tall windows. He imagined the weight of the pen as he signed donation checks to causes he loved. He no longer focused on the prize. He embodied the person who had already claimed it. That night, something shifted. He felt no excitement, only peace. And within days, a set of circumstances emerged that led him to win not the highest jackpot, but more than enough to fulfill his original desires. That is how it happens, not with striving, but with surrender, not with manipulation, but with mastery of the inner world. You are not changing the world. You are changing your awareness of self. And the world reflects that change. If you feel you must repeat your affirmations endlessly just to maintain belief, stop and ask, have I assumed the state? Or am I still trying to convince myself? Assumption is not repetition. It is arrival. When the state feels natural, you no longer repeat it to force belief. You express it because it has become who you are. Let your emotional tone be your compass. The state you live in will always carry a feeling tone. Wealth has a tone. Relief has a tone. Confidence has a tone. Find that tone and dwell in it. Let it color your thoughts, guide your reactions, shape your decisions. And you will find that without strain, the outer world rearranges itself to match the frequency of your inner world. The one who lives in the end is not worried about when or how. He has already received an imagination. He walks the earth as though it were already done, because in truth it is. Persistence is the secret key that separates the one who manifests from the one who waits. It is not the single assumption that creates the miracle, but the continual return to the state, the unshakable loyalty to the end already achieved. To persist does not mean to struggle or strive, it means to remain. And to remain in the assumption of the fulfilled desire while the senses tempt you with appearances to the contrary, is the greatest act of dominion one can perform. You may assume tonight that you are the winner, that the numbers align, that the world has already acknowledged your triumph. But if tomorrow you wake up and say, it didn't happen, you have exited the state. You have broken the continuity of belief. You have denied the very thing you were seeking. And yet, the one who persists says instead, it is done. My assumption is my truth. I do not need to see it to know it. I have already received. This inner discipline is not built on logic. It is built on emotional dominion. You do not control the world by force, but by feeling. Your feeling is the language of creation. It speaks in vibrations, not in declarations alone. You may declare, I am rich, but if you feel fearful when the bills arrive, you are not rich in consciousness. And consciousness is the only substance that matters. You must own the emotion of the wish fulfilled so fully that your inner world cannot be shaken. There will always be voices, internal and external, that challenge the assumption. They will say, be realistic, or don't get your hopes up. But those voices are echoes of former beliefs. They are shadows of the old self, and you must meet them not with argument, but with silence. They cannot enter the new state unless you invite them. Your job is not to debate the old identity, but to fully embody the new one. Imagine living in a world where every thought becomes flesh, where every emotion is a seed. This is not imagination. This is your reality. Every assumption is a cause, and every event is an effect. If you are surrounded by lack, look not at the bank account, but at the mood you have been entertaining. Has your imagination been drenched in images of insufficiency, of waiting, of hoping without receiving? Then change the inner climate. You do not wait for abundance. You become abundance. When you walk the street, you must walk as one who has already been chosen. When you speak to another, speak as one who holds the secret of wealth within, not arrogantly, but silently, with the confidence that comes from knowing the unseen is more real than the seen. When you lie down at night, close your eyes, not with longing, but with gratitude. The assumption of the wish fulfilled must be your final act of the day, or what you fall asleep in you live in. There is a version of you now who is not struggling, who is not seeking, who is not questioning. That version exists. He's not far away. He is near. And you become him not by effort, but by identity. Close the gap between who you think you are and who you want to be by feeling now what that version of you feels. There is no distance in consciousness. The shift can happen in a moment, one inner movement, from fear to faith, from lack to fullness, from asking to knowing, and your world begins to bend in response. The most important thing you can ever do is to live without contradiction. If you imagine wealth in meditation but speak of debt to your friends, you are divided. If you affirm abundance but feel undeserving when someone offers help, you are divided. And a house divided cannot stand. Every aspect of your being must agree with the new state. Let your words, your posture, your inner dialogue, and your expectations all point to one truth. It is done. This is why many fail. They assume once, then return to doubt. They feel the wish fulfilled, then watch the calendar. They imagine riches, then speak of misfortune. But the one who walks in faith has no contradiction in him. He does not look around to measure progress. He remains in the knowing that the inner state is law, and the outer world must conform, not might, must. There are no small assumptions. Every state has power. The state you persist in, the emotional atmosphere you sustain, becomes the blueprint from which your future emerges. The subconscious mind does not care whether the state is called wealth or lack. It simply produces in kind. So you must choose. And having chosen, you must remain. Let others doubt. Let them question the law. Let them count odds and measure probabilities. You do not need permission to receive. You do not need evidence before belief. You only need to believe with such intensity that the evidence has no choice but to appear. And when it does, you will not be surprised. You will not say, "Can you believe it?" You will say, "Of course," because you already lived it. You rehearsed the phone call. You counted the zeros. You celebrated in silence. You walked as though it were done. And so it was. And so you see, this world responds not to effort, but to assumption, not to striving, but to being. The lottery, the wealth, the breakthrough, the transformation, these are not rewards given to the fortunate few. They are manifestations of states of consciousness faithfully occupied. When you understand that all things exist now, that creation is finished, you stop chasing and begin selecting. You stop asking and begin receiving. You no longer see yourself as a beggar in the world of possibility, but as the one who commands reality through inner certainty. You are not required to know how. You are only required to know who. Who are you in imagination? That is the root of all that follows if you live as the one who wins, who receives, who gives, who rests in abundance. Then the world around you will echo that truth. If you revise the past, script the present, and saturate your being with a feeling of fulfillment, you will awaken to find the outer world molded in your image. And when it happens, when the numbers are called, or the funds arrive, or the gift is received, you will not marvel. You will not stand in disbelief. You will know deeply and quietly that it could not have happened otherwise. For the law is simple and the law is sure. Whatever you assume with feeling and persist in must by divine necessity become fact. Do not wait for proof. Do not wait for science. Assume, enter the state, remain, and let the bridge appear beneath your feet as you walk with faith, in silence, and in certainty that what you have imagined is already yours. The lottery is not won on paper, it is won in the mind. And the one who wins within will find that all the world must rise to meet him.